Thunder hammered against the glass, but the noise inside the living room was sharper. Eloise, Maeve, and Amelie stared at the television screen as the headline flashed in bold, red letters. Local burger prices skyrocket overnight. The three women exchanged a look of disbelief. This was not a market fluctuation. It was a calculated strike. They grabbed their gear and drove through the relentless downpour, tires hydroplaning on the slick asphalt until they reached Mint's office. The door swung open to reveal a room thick with tension. Mint stood by a desk, but she was not alone. A woman leaned against the mahogany, tipping the brim of her hat as they entered. "Howdy, partners," Scarlet Starfire drawled, the metallic chime of her spurs cutting through the silence. "Seems like someone is rustling more than just cattle in this town." Mint did not waste time on pleasantries. She pointed a steady finger at a map pinned to the wall, highlighting the industrial outskirts. "The meat factory," Mint said, her voice low and hard. The group gathered around the map, the weight of the situation settling in. They turned toward the door, ready to move. The van skidded to a halt on the gravel, tires spinning in the mud as the industrial complex loomed ahead. Rain lashed against the metal siding, masking their approach. They moved as a single unit toward the rear of the facility, finding a side vent that had been left unsecured. One by one, they slipped through the narrow opening, dropping silently onto the concrete floor. Rows of stainless steel vats stretched into the darkness, humming with the rhythmic vibration of heavy machinery. They navigated the maze of pipes and catwalks, keeping low to avoid the patrolling beams of light. Reaching the CEO office, they found the door locked. Eloise stepped forward, fingers dancing across the security panel until the light turned green. Inside, the room was sterile and cold. She bypassed the terminal lock, and lines of code began to scroll rapidly across the monitor. A file labeled Project Bulk appeared. They opened the document, revealing logs of toxic injections. Maeve reached for the port to begin the download. The progress bar on the screen hit 100%, just as the room erupted in a high-pitched rhythmic wail. Red emergency lights began to strobe, painting the office in frantic pulses of color. Maeve ripped the drive from the port, and they bolted. They sprinted down the hallway, boots slamming against the metal grating. They reached the loading ramp and slid down the slick surface, hitting the pouring rain outside with enough momentum to keep running. Shadows detached themselves from the walls. 3 guards blocked their path, batons humming with electric current. Amelie did not slow down. She ducked under a wide swing, pivoted, and drove a palm strike into the lead guard's chest, sending him reeling backward. Scarlet saw the second guard closing in. She whipped her lasso through the air, the rope tightening around the man's ankles and yanking his feet from under him. They scrambled into the van, the engine roaring to life before the doors were fully shut. Tires screamed against the asphalt, throwing up sheets of mud. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle when the van returned to the industrial outskirts. The factory stood silent, a dark silhouette against the night sky. They moved with practiced precision, carrying heavy duffel bags filled with C4. There was no conversation, only the sound of boots on gravel and the rhythmic click of equipment being checked. They slipped back through the perimeter, navigating the shadows toward the main support beams. Mint directed the placement, her hands steady as she pressed the plastic explosives against the cold steel. They wired the charges in a daisy chain, trailing the detonator cord back to a safe distance. Once the final connection was secured, they retreated behind a concrete embankment. Mint held the trigger, her thumb hovering over the button. She pressed down. For a fraction of a second, the world held its breath. Then, a roar tore through the night, louder than thunder. The ground bucked beneath them, throwing dirt and debris into the air. The factory groaned, its steel frame buckling under the force of the blast. It collapsed inward, a cascade of twisted metal and shattered concrete folding into a heap of rubble. A cloud of dust billowed out, settling over the site. They stood in the dark, watching the smoke clear, the silence returning to the industrial lot. It was done. The source of the toxic deception lay in ruins, and for a brief, sharp moment, the air felt clean. The dust began to settle, but Mint did not lower her guard. She pulled a tablet from her bag, the blue light illuminating her face as she tapped through a series of satellite feeds. Her fingers froze. She zoomed in on a sector miles away from the ruins. A structure identical to the one they had just leveled sat in the center of a fenced compound. She tapped the screen again, pulling up a live interior feed. The CEO stood at a desk, his back to the camera, methodically stacking thick piles of cash. Mint gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles turning white as the blood drained from her hands. She turned the screen toward the others. The silence of the night returned, heavier than before. No one spoke. The victory they had felt seconds ago evaporated into the cold air. Mint stared at the image of the man, her jaw set in a hard line. He had a backup. The game was far from over. She tucked the tablet away, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon.